Hi, I'm Emma, one of the gallery assistants at Rugby Art Gallery Museum, and whilst we're not open to the public right now, we still wanted to bring you some of our collection's highlights from home. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about an artwork called Portrait of a Lady by the artist Sickert. And I guess the reason I wanted to talk to you about this one is that when I started as a gallery assistant, it was definitely one of the names that jumped out at me on the collections list. I knew a little bit already about Sickert and his kind of influence of Impressionism and his role in documenting everyday life in Victorian and early 20th century. And I kind of wanted to find out about how and why we had so many in the collection, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's just zoom in on this for a moment. Now, the artwork is a framed etching from copper plate, and it's a small artwork, so just to give you an idea of scale, this image right in the centre is only around 13 by 10 centimetres. Now, the original etching plate was created by the artist in 1894, but this print dates from a lot later. It was created in 1945, which was after the artist's death, by the printmaker David Strang, and he had been commissioned by the Walter Sickert Trust to create prints from 48 of his plates as limited editions. And the idea of this was to make them available to public collections such as the one at Rugby Art Gallery Museum, to have increased public awareness of the significance of Sickert's artwork and particularly their importance in recording Victorian and early 20th century life. Now, there are 9 artworks in total in the Rugby collection, and they were acquired in 1947. So just to go back to the artwork, the print here is print 15 of 16 prints taken, and they were made before the plate was cancelled. The original copper plate is now in the collection of Islington Libraries. So I guess the first question is, who is the portrait of? And the answer is, it's a portrait of a fellow artist and a lifelong friend of Sickert called Sylvia Goss. Sylvia was identified by Sickert for her promising talent as an artist and invited to go on an etching course at Westminster Art School, where he was a teacher at the time. She later went on to teach for him at his own art school, and they became members of the Camden Town Artist Group, which, although it was only around for a few years, is still a really significant in paving the way for artists creating artwork that represented the sometimes harsh realities of everyday life, and just being really honest in what they're making. Walter Sickert was and is best known as a portrait artist, and like many of the fellow post-impressionists at the time, they were really kind of noticing this difference between the classes. So the elite person that were being asked to paint portraits of and for, and their own working class background, and there's kind of an irony in that, and noticing that there was maybe a gap in the artworks that were being represented in society. So they set about creating portraits of everyday people. So someone sitting on a street corner, for example, or just their kind of friends and associates that weren't necessarily being represented. And they really started to set the trend in doing that and making that socially acceptable. I guess the other big change and shift at that time was from the invention of photography. But there was still definitely a trend for dressing up and wearing your best clothes and showing your wealth in that. And also for women in particular, to show that they were had a very demure and a softer side to them in portraits. And this is kind of where this portrait of Sylvia Goss fits in. It's a portrait of a friend, of a close friend, and it doesn't fit in with that style that you traditionally know. So just to pick up on the clothes that she's wearing, I won't necessarily read into the fact that she's wearing a hat as being a symbol of status. It's more of a fashion, of a representation of the time, of that era. If you look more at the hooded coat that she's wearing and the ruffles around the neck, the way the artist has represented her and the way the picture's been cropped quite low comparatively, make sure the clothes have a weight to them and the shoulders feel dropped, and it feels like there's a real weight that's dragging you down. And that kind of picks up on the gaze, and yes, the head feels comparatively small compared to the rest of the body. That is partly due to that cropping and where that's been done, but it means that the gaze is still holding itself, it's still looking straight at you, and it plays off that clothes and that body language, and it just feels a little bit forlorn, almost a little bit sad. maybe it's definitely not a portrait of that demure look that you would expect to see. And the artist just kind of really picks up on that in the technique that he's using as well. If you were to zoom in and really look at the individual marks, there's a speed to them, there's a rough edge to them. You can feel that the kind of process of putting those marks and scratching away at the etching plates. And that's kind of it kind of gives it a bit of life. It feels like it's a slightly raw portrait. It feels like it's an honest portrait. And a portrait of a friend, a portrait of just somebody you would see in everyday life, and just really representing them for who they are as an artist.